The BTK Killer, the man next door, he lived in a quiet town. The kind of place where nothing ever happened. Where the wind rolled across Kansas fields and everyone knew your name. Dennis Rader was the man next door. He waved from his driveway, fixed fences, and went to church every Sunday. A husband, a father, a respected citizen. But for 30 years he carried another name. BTK, 3 letters that made an entire city afraid of the dark. Bind, torture, kill. In February 2005, after decades of silence, police surrounded his small white house in Wichita. Neighbors watched from behind curtains as officers led him out in handcuffs. He looked calm, even polite, the perfect neighbor. Until the mask cracked. Inside his home, detectives found boxes neatly labeled, carefully stored, each one a record of someone's nightmare. Photographs, drawings, notes. Evidence of a life spent in 2 halves. For years, BTK had written letters to police, mocking them. Then he vanished in 1991, disappearing like a ghost. People thought he was dead or that the killer had moved away. They were wrong. He had simply gone quiet. And now, at last, the monster had a face. Monsters aren't born fully formed. They begin in the silence of childhood, in thoughts no one ever hears. Dennis Rader was born in 1945 in Kansas. He was the oldest of 4 boys. From the outside, it was a normal Midwestern family church on Sundays. Chores in the yard. But inside, Dennis felt invisible. His parents worked long hours. He often said later that no one truly saw him. He craved control, attention, and soon discovered a strange fascination with power and helplessness. In adolescence, he began building fantasies in his mind, imagining scenarios he could orchestrate where he decided who lived, who obeyed, who feared. These thoughts grew darker, private rituals of control that became an addiction. No one noticed. He graduated, joined the Air Force, served quietly, returned home. 2 friends, he seemed disciplined, intelligent, meticulous. Inside, the fantasies had evolved. He married Paula Dietz, had children, bought a house, joined a church. On the outside, everything was stable. But inside, the old hunger still whispered. He needed to act, to prove that he was more than ordinary. And in 1974, he did. It was January 15th, 1974, a bitterly cold morning in Wichita. In a quiet neighborhood, the Otero family began their day. By nightfall, they were gone. When police entered the house, the scene froze them in place. Whoever had done this was calm, organized, deliberate. He left little behind, but the brutality was unlike anything they had seen. There was no motive, no robbery, nothing stolen. The newspapers called it a mystery. The police had no leads. But somewhere in the city, Dennis Rader was watching the headlines with pride. He wanted them to know him, not his face, but his work. So he wrote a typed letter full of misspellings and arrogance sent to the police. He described the crime in detail only the killer could know. At the bottom, he signed it with 3 letters: BTK, bind, torture, kill. A name was born, one that would haunt Wichita for decades. By day, Dennis Rader was the picture of normalcy. He led church meetings, worked at a security company, raised his children, mowed his lawn. He enforced neighborhood codes, a man obsessed with order and control. By night, he watched people. He called them projects. He stalked, planned, took notes, and sometimes acted. His victims were chosen for reasons even he couldn't fully explain. They fit the image in his mind, the fantasy that had been growing since childhood. Each act was rehearsed, ritualistic, controlled, and afterward he returned home to dinner with his family, as if nothing had happened. Years passed. The letters continued, mocking, gloating, daring the police to catch him. Each time the city panicked, each time he vanished again. For decades, detectives hunted shadows. Then, suddenly, silence. After 1991, BTK disappeared. No more letters. No more crimes. People moved on. They thought the nightmare was over. But Dennis Rader missed the attention. He missed the power. He watched new killers dominate the news and felt forgotten. In 2004, he broke his silence. A local newspaper ran an article about the 30th anniversary of the BTK killings, how the killer had never been caught. Rader couldn't resist. He sent a package to the media claiming to be BTK. Inside were photographs, writings, and a floppy disk, a fatal mistake. The disk's metadata led police straight to the Christ Lutheran Church computer, registered to Dennis Rader. When they matched DNA from old evidence to a sample from his daughter's medical record, the truth was undeniable. After 30 years, they had him. On February 25, 2005, Dennis Rader was arrested. He confessed without hesitation, almost proudly. He described each act in cold, methodical detail, as if he were reading from a manual he'd written himself. What makes someone like Dennis Rader? He wasn't insane, doctors said. He knew right from wrong. He simply chose to create his own rules. Control was his religion. He built a world where he was the center, where fear was worship, and he was the god who demanded it. He kept trophies to relive each event, small reminders that the power had been real. When he wrote to the police, it wasn't to get caught. It was to remind them he existed, that he was smarter, stronger, untouchable. But pride is a fragile thing. And in the end, it was his ego, not his intellect, that exposed him. At the police station, Dennis Rader sat calmly. He spoke politely, even joked with detectives. He called his crimes projects, his victims numbers. He seemed proud, not remorseful. When asked why he did it, he simply said, "I had this factor called BTK. I couldn't stop it." He was sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms without parole. In court, he listened to the families speak, expressionless. Only once did his mask slip, when his daughter addressed him as Dad. The monster blinked, and for a second the man appeared. Then he was gone again. Today, Dennis Rader sits in solitary confinement. He's over 70 now, still alive, still writing, still analyzing himself, as if the mystery of BTK is one he can solve from the inside. Wichita changed after Dennis Rader. A city that once trusted its own shadow learned to fear the ordinary. Because BTK wasn't a stranger in the dark. He was the man across the street, the neighbor who smiled as he passed you on the sidewalk. His story isn't just about murder. It's about the mask of normalcy, how evil can wear a familiar face, and how control can twist a human being into something unrecognizable. For 30 years, Dennis Rader wanted one thing: to be remembered, and in the cruelest irony of all, he got exactly what he wanted. In the end, every story about monsters is also a story about mirrors. We look into them, trying to see what makes someone like him different from us. And sometimes the reflection stares back a little too clearly. He was a father, a husband, a neighbor. And beneath it all, a darkness that never stopped whispering. Dennis Rader, the BTK Killer. Proof that sometimes the scariest monsters don't live in nightmares. They live next door.